Great, thank you. Very good, thank you. Well, good afternoon. Come on, y'all. Good afternoon. All right, there we go. Very good. Very good. Well, thank you for joining us this afternoon. We're excited to host this Learning Lounge session, and hopefully you'll walk away with just a few insights in regards to proper needle selection. Feel free to ask questions at the end, and hopefully it will be more engaging than you thought it would be. All right? We're not going to say great, but we're going to say better. How about that? So in case you don't know about Neogen, because most of you probably have a little experience with us, but you're wondering, why are they talking about needles, right? Like, those are my genomics people. So Neogen actually is a global company, and we have 3 different legs of our organization. We are represented there with the labs that have the flask-like marking next to the countries that have labs in them. And of course, our headquarters for animal safety is going to be in Lexington, Kentucky, and Genomics is in Lincoln. But, so most of you know us through Angus GS, and if you're not an Angus GS customer, please come talk to us. We'd love to visit with you about that. But very few of you know probably that we are also a food safety company. So we have a leg that's in Lansing, Michigan that does food, feed, and beverage pathogen testing. And we also have an animal safety division to our company where we are able to supply animal products, animal safety products, through distributors, but also we also now offer those through your normal territory manager that comes by and talks to you about Angus GS. And so if they're there and you need the opportunity to buy some needles or syringes, that's certainly a conversation that they can have with you. So what's the big deal, right? We all give cattle injections, or at least I hope you do, at least with some vaccines and such. And so what's the big deal about a needle? Why is it so important? Why are you learning about it today? Well, the big deal is that on average, we give cattle on an annual basis about 3 injections per year. Raise your hand if you AI or ET. Okay, you do more, all right? And you know you do more, because most of the time when you're setting them up, you do 3 just getting ready to AI and more if you're doing embryo transfer. And so because we have so many injections going into an animal, we have a lot of opportunity to mess things up. And as beef producers, we don't need to mess anything up because we need our product to be the very best product that they eat in terms of a protein. So if you give about 3 injections in a cow per year on a cow herd basis, there's 91.9 million cows across the country, which we're talking about 275 million times we're putting a needle into a cow. And I haven't even accounted for a calf at this point. That's purely a cow herd. So I think it's important to remind you of BQA guidelines. I'm sure all of you know this, but I think it also gives you that representation of the triangle that you're shooting for when you're doing subcutaneous and IM injections. Be sure you miss that spinal column and jugular furrow, as well as the nuchae ligamentum up top, so that that's the ligament that moves their head up and down. We certainly don't want to inject there, but we have that bigger triangle that is allowable for subcutaneous injections versus the smaller for intramuscular injections. Some folks use that tinting technique, and some just simply go in at an angle when they're giving those injections. But you can see, based upon that graphic, how easy it would be if you had the wrong needle length to go into the wrong spot, right? And so if we're taking and we're giving a sub-Q injection and we use a 1-inch needle, how quickly do we get into the muscle? Pretty quick, right? Pretty quick. And for 46 cents a piece on a needle, yeah, I promise you it's worth having a box that are a little shorter needles for your sub-Q and maybe a little longer needles for your IM to make sure that we get it in the right place, because if we don't get in the right place, will it work? No, efficacy will fail. So in terms of an impact on the industry, because really the efficacy, if it fails, that's one thing. But if we hurt the product that we're trying to produce, that's quite another, because that will go on to be able to impact the consumers that are eating our products. If y'all go to a restaurant and you have a terrible eating experience, how many times are you gonna go back? Not very many, right? How many times, if you go and you have a friend that's going to eat a piece of protein, and let's say they just bought a steak and it was a $50 steak, like some of my friends had last night, and they have a terrible eating experience, How many of those do they have to have before they decide, I don't think I want to really eat meat anymore or beef anymore? That poultry is the same every single time, right? You have to remember that consistency is extremely important, and you all are part of that, whether you're injecting a cow that's 12 years old or a calf that's going to a feedlot. Either one of them will end up in the food supply at the end of the day. So the reason we want to make sure that we, as a producer from a profitability standpoint, that we get this correct is because every time we get it incorrect, when they go to harvest, they'll have to trim that product, right? And every time they trim product, what do you lose? Pounds, right? Every trim, every condemnable is pounds lost. And if we get paid, we're in a pounds business. If you get paid for fewer pounds, then you're going to have less money in your pocket at the end of the day. On the flip side of that, from a consumer standpoint, palatability becomes an issue. If they cut into a steak and it has a huge lesion or a great big collagen piece because it has damage to the tissue, is that a desirable eating experience? Nope, right? Not good. And so we want to make sure we minimize those because palatability, I think for us, that's our winner, right? We have the best tasting, the best eating experience of any protein that you can offer, unless we mess it up, all right? Let's make sure that the chef is the only one that messes it up in this process, not us. So significant economic losses can happen from the trim. Palatability issues will lead to decreased demand, and so we have to make sure that we do this right and that we get it right when we're starting to utilize needle selection. So there's 3 different pieces of information regarding needles. First is the hub material. You can have the propylene or aluminum hub. For us personally, because we run cows at our place too, we utilize that propylene more on a one-time use type of a needle injection. Whether you are changing needles after every single cow when you're working them, or whether you're just giving a shot of antibiotic to one calf and then you're going to dispose of it, those as well as aluminum have worked really well, with the propylene being just a little less expensive, but also being a little less sturdy in terms of when you're utilizing them. They have a little more give, a little more flex, and potentially a little more break to them. Gauge can go from a teeny tiny gauge at 25 to a great big whopping gauge at 14. And those of us that have gotten vaccinations recently of any kind realize that gauge is important, right? Size matters, okay? Because if you're jabbed with a 14 gauge versus a 22, I promise you're gonna feel it, all right? That tissue tear also impacts those calves that we are working on and that we're vaccinating or we're treating. And so we need to make sure that we get it right. We make sure that we are utilizing BQA standards and we select the proper gauge as well as the proper length. Because again, too long, we're gonna get where we shouldn't be, and too short, we may not get to where we need to be. So I told you that we have those polyhub as well as aluminum. The polys are maybe more utilized in those smaller animals versus large animal applications. I can tell you, I'm never gonna go down an alleyway and vaccinate a group of cows with a polyhub. It's not gonna happen. And in fact, I'm gonna introduce you to an even better one here in a little bit that hopefully will be able to influence your operation just like it did to ours when we switched from an aluminum hub to our D3. In terms of needle gauge and length, you can see on the left 2 columns are sub-Q, where we're gonna look for a lighter calves having a 16 or 18 gauge needle with a 1/2 or 3/4 inch length. At our place, I really like that 5/8 inch length and an 18 gauge needle when we're vaccinating baby calves. If we're maybe giving some pre-breeding vaccines to cows, maybe a 16 gauge needle, but I still like that short 5/8 inch needle because you can go down an alley and be able to give injections into a group of cows if you're working a large number, and you can know that you're in the right place, you're not getting into the muscle like you potentially could be if you have a little longer 1-inch needle. So IM, on the other hand, we want those longer needles, the 1 inch or the 1.5 inch, 18 or 20 if they're small calves, going up to 16 gauge for cattle that are over 700 pounds. One thing that this doesn't discuss, but I think I don't know if you all ever experience it, but I know when we give vaccines to calves, I like to use that 18 gauge needle purely because I feel like less comes back at me, if that makes sense. I feel like I get more into the animal and less kind of spilling over out of where I just stuck that needle. Needle gauge and length. If we have something that is too short, the injection won't go into the correct tissue. You all, if you've ever vaccinated anything and you put a needle in an animal and it doesn't feel right, it doesn't go in real easy and smooth, you're in the wrong place. You need to readjust and get into the correct subcutaneous layer. And then if that is put in the wrong place, then it won't be able to be absorbed properly and your efficacy will decrease. That's a big problem if you're only getting, especially if you're only getting like 2 vaccines in a calf instead of 3. You can have some efficacy issues by which your cattle might be more susceptible to that disease that you're vaccinating for. If it's too long, on the other hand, you're more likely to get into the muscle on a subcutaneous injection. And on a young animal, if you have a longer needle, you can even sometimes hit that bone or a nerve, and that can really hurt those young calves. And most of the time, if we're giving an antibiotic to a young calf, they're already kind of struggling. So we need to make sure that we take care of those calves as best we can. Obviously, viscosity as well as the volume that you're giving could also impact the size of the needle that you're utilizing. I know for us, we have some antibiotics that we use, and if it's wintertime and they're really thick, sometimes we'll go to that 16 gauge needle because it's the only thing that'll draw it up when we're out in the pasture checking cows. On the flip side of that, I guess, and I should say, extend that and say, we also, if you have a lot of problems with those really thick products and you're in an area by which you get cold and it's really hard to keep those products at that warmer or room temperature while you're out in the pasture checking cattle, we do have some 14 gauge needle options available. And we could certainly work to get those to you as well. That are BQA, they fall within the BQA guidelines. Sharp needles eliminate tissue trauma, right? Just think about if you were the 20th guy in line for your flu vaccine this fall and they jabbed you with the blunt end of a needle. It would kind of hurt, right? It kind of hurts me thinking about it. And so be sure as we're working through this that we have really sharp needles that we're utilizing. Once they start to feel dull, I promise you, if you have done 20 head with a 46-cent needle, it's okay to change it, right? It's okay to go ahead and move on to the next one. And I say that, and I grew up, don't tell him I said this, right? But I grew up with a dad. I remember as a young kid, he'd stand there and he'd look at the needle with his pliers and he'd straighten it, right? It's the way in which things were done clear back in the 80s when I was a kid. Now we have BQA guidelines that kind of tell us that you're more likely to break off needles when we start to bend needles back into place. And those are much, much greater concerns than simply a 46-cent needle versus having that metal in the product that we're serving our customers. So what causes broken off needles? Bending and straightening needles is probably number one. So never, ever, 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 ever go and straighten a needle. It's time for a new one if it's bent. Because if it's bent and you're going in for an injection, at that point you're causing more tissue damage. Too many injections per needle. You're using a blunt one, right? You have too many injections that you're giving with just one needle or a wrong size of needle for the job that you're doing. Or maybe you have untrained vaccinators. I know all of you have top-notch hired men and women, but sometimes they're improperly trained. So D3 needles, that's one of the cool products that Neogen has available. It's one of a kind in the industry in regards to its ability to carry on the 3Ds, and it was an answer to packers saying, we need a traceable needle so that if it does break off in animals as you're vaccinating or as you're treating those animals, we are able to detect it in the cooler and we're able to get it out of the food supply. So D3, they just really, it was driven by packers wanting to make sure that we didn't have those contaminants in the product that we're serving our customers. And so our company created a D3 needle that is you can see it by a red cap on the needle. You'll know that those are the D3s. It's going to be very, very sturdy. All right, at our place, I think label says, Ashby, correct me if I'm wrong, 20 head per needle is what the label says. I can let you know that we have had great success with that needle at our place. If you're in an environment by which you can give a vaccine to more than 1 or 2 head at a time. Some of you all will change a needle after every animal due to infectious diseases. And I highly respect that, and that is more than fine. If you're in a situation by which you can't, this needle provides a lot of strength. It has a lot of that strength in terms of its ability to not break and bend, and it stays sharp for a long period of time and a high number of head. It's detectable, so it's 100% detectable in the cooler versus 15% of other brands are able to be detected due to the stainless steel alloy that it is made from, and it's patented in order to be detectable. And it's dependable. If you have trouble with that needle, there are 17 territory managers that can help you across the country, in addition to our animal safety team that covers a large, the entire country as well. Please reach out to us. We have a great customer service, and it's one phone call away to a friendly face that you know, and I promise you, has no problem. You'll be able to understand them. They will talk to you, and you won't have to go through a whole bunch of keypad entries and chat sessions and things like that, like I have with my local cable company recently, right? One step further, which is an innovative step that we have taken, is called the D3X needles. These are going to be more than extremely popular in the pork industry, because if you think vaccinating calves is hard, piglets are worse, right? Big fat hogs are worse. But I certainly could see applications by which this could be utilized in the cattle industry, because we have an extraction collar that goes on that needle. If it breaks off, then you will be able to see it. In that middle picture, you can see it has the little flags that come out, and you would be able to extract that needle even if it broke off under the skin. A lot of processors right now are asking for 100% certification and guarantee that no needles breaks have occurred. And in order to be able to fulfill this with some documentation, this is a needle by which you could do that with 100% certainty, and know that every needle, or if any needles broke off, you were able to retrieve them. So the D3X needle is coming soon. I believe it is on a cargo ship in the middle of the ocean, right, fellas? And so we've been excited about it. It should have been here a while ago, but as soon as it hits a port, we'll be excitedly going and getting it off. Next up, I'm going to have Nick Hammett come up and talk a little bit about our Prima-Shot gun. And I will also show you our territory map so you can find where you're at, and you can find who is your rep. If you can't read it because it has such small print and there's so many of us, come up to the screen right here in front of me, and you can get a good idea, or ask one of us. We would love to help you. But the Prima-Shot that Nick is going to introduce is the multi-dose syringe that at our house comes at a premium, by which normally, because we're frugal, we still have one of those old All-Flex ones where you push the button and you pull it back. I hand that right over to my husband and say, there you are, that's your side. And I take the Prima-Shot for my side because I enjoy working with it that much better. So Nick, I will let you talk a little bit about that gun that has certainly made things a little easier at our place.
Very good. Thank you, Paige. I just wanted to share this. This is kind of an unexpected last-minute deal. My job with Neogen is not selling animal safety products. It's in genomics. But for 13 years before this job, I worked for an 8,000 head cattle operation with an extensive vaccine program. So I've used a lot of these repeater syringes, from the stainless metal ones to the blue ones to this one. And I wanted to share this with you guys because I guarantee you, if you use this one, you will not go back to another one. It's got some advantages that I really like. In particular, one of my biggest challenges with some of the other ones is trying to thread this barrel back on. Some of them are very small threaded, they're plastic threaded. I've got to try to get the plunger at just the right length so I can try to get that barrel lined up correctly. This one is very coarse threaded, so it's easy. It's almost difficult not to get this one threaded back on. I literally have spent 5 minutes trying to thread one of these barrels back onto these after cleaning them. So that to me is the #1 selling point with this one. Also, some of them have a button that you have to press, and then a lot of times that button doesn't totally release it, and I have to cock this handle back before it totally releases it. This one is very clean and easy with the plunger. If the plunger is vertical, it's able to pull medicine. As soon as you get it pulled, you just turn it 90 degrees, and now it's ready to go. It also has 10 preset settings, so not only does it have 1 through 5 cc's, it also has half cc increments in between those. So if you're getting very specific on your dosages, particularly with an antibiotic, and you need to go to a half cc of something, you have the ability to do that. I think the rubber washer in this one is better than most of them that I've used. It doesn't expand as easily, it doesn't come off as easily, it doesn't need replaced as often. It has a Triton plastic barrel that is scratch-proof, chemical resistant, and also amber colored for UV protection. And it has a stainless knurled nut on the end that easily comes off. So you can take it apart, clean it really easily, minimal pieces to it, very clean in terms of overall design so that you're able to clean it easily. It's also very engineered to be the most precise instrument that is sold in the cattle industry today. So for all those reasons, particularly the barrel, is why I really like this product. Just wanted to share this with you really quickly. You're welcome to come over to the booth. You can try this out. You can get it from any of those reps that are up there on that list. You can order it at Neogen.com. You can order it from almost every distributing company out there, but a lot of folks don't know about this, and having used all of them in high quantities, I assure you, you'll like it and you'll probably never go back to another one. So just wanted to share that with you while Paige is sharing what we have in the needles. The D3 needles are super stout, super durable. They have a special cut on them that stays sharp a very long time. I promise if you try those, you'll be hard pressed to go back to the aluminums or polys as well. So appreciate your time.
One of the other things I like about that syringe is it has different colored buttons to go on the end of it. So if you have a modified live versus a killed vaccine, or a cow versus a calf vaccine, if you're doing pre-breeding vaccinations at the same time as you're vaccinating calves, you could have multiple syringes and know what's in them, so that, I don't know about you, but sometimes I have to write on it with a tagging pin to try to figure out and make sure we don't get them swapped up when we're reloading. That's super helpful to be able to have the little buttons on the end that change colors, and you can pop different colors in to know what you have in there.
And some of them have a knob on the end that's your pull knob that can change colors, and sometimes it gets stripped out and you go to pull on it and that knob is off and it's stripped out. This won't do that. It just has a little insert where you change the color there on the back of this. So I like it quite a bit. Appreciate your time.
If you stayed and listened to us today, thank you. Be sure we have a treat for you to stop by the ladies over here that have red tickets. They are giving away animal safety products. You will go and get your ticket from them and then go to our booth. We would ship products to you if you win, so you don't have to worry about carrying on a case of needles and possibly setting off TSA. Thank you so much. Y'all have a great afternoon.